Order in.
お召し上がりください。スフレレジェドグラス。さあ、いただくとしましょう。神の舌持つ少女の皿を。
これは
ただのパンケーキではありません。
2枚のパンケーキの間に。
Orders up, service please. Starting off today's recipe, we're making our own red bean paste. Into a medium saucepan, we're going to add in 150 grams of dried red beans that have been rinsed and drained. You can get these at most Asian supermarkets. Cover the beans with water so that they're fully submerged and the water level is about 5 to 10 centimeters above the beans. Then you want to turn the heat up to high and bring this to a boil. Once the beans are boiling, we're going to turn down the heat to a simmer and allow them to simmer for 1.5 to 2 hours to fully soften. During the simmering process, you'll need to keep an eye on the water level and add more water to keep the beans fully submerged if required. This is how my beans looked after about an hour and 20 minutes of cooking. You can see that they're very hot because I'm like burning my fingers right now, but when you squeeze them between your fingers, it should turn into mush with no resistance. At this point, we can drain the beans from the cooking water and reserve some of that water in case you want to make smooth red bean paste. After letting the beans drain for about 5 minutes, they're going to go back into the pan over a medium-low heat, and now we can add in 50 grams of our muscovado sugar. If you can't find muscovado specifically, just sub it out with either light brown sugar or a 50-50 split of white sugar and dark brown sugar. Mix the sugar and the beans together, ensuring that the sugar is getting well distributed and dissolved. By mixing these two together, you should see that while the sugar is cooking, it's also breaking down the beans further. Once the first lot of sugar is fully incorporated, we're going to add in the remaining sugar and stir to combine until again the sugar is fully dissolved. Then at this point, if you want a chunky red bean paste, just mash the mixture in the pan with a wooden spoon or a potato masher, or if you want a smooth red bean paste, you can use a stick blender or transfer it into a food processor and blend it until you're happy with the consistency. Now, if you think that your paste is a bit dry, you can add in a couple tablespoons of the reserved cooking water and blend it until you're happy with how it looks. Once you're happy with your Anko, you can turn off the heat and transfer it over into a shallow container or a plate and spread it out into a thin and even layer. Let this cool for about 10 minutes at room temperature and then cover and refrigerate until needed. Next up, we're making the main garnish of the dish, a black sesame tuille, or in my case, edible coral. Now I know in the show it's stated that Erina makes a black sesame tuille, but given that they have such a fine lattice pattern in the anime and manga, I just feel like edible coral is going to visually hit the mark a lot better, but if you really feel like making a tuille, just go for it, I'm not going to stop you. If you are going to make the coral, then into the jar of a stick blender, we're going to combine 55 grams of oil, 65 grams of water, 10 grams of all-purpose flour, and 10 grams of muscovado sugar. Using our stick blender, we're going to blend this for about 10 to 15 seconds until it's well emulsified, and then we can head over to the stove. Place a small non-stick frying pan over medium-high heat and let that heat up for about 2 to 3 minutes, and at that point you can add in 1 tablespoon worth of your coral batter. You should see it immediately begin to bubble rapidly if the pan is hot enough. Scatter over some black sesame seeds and then allow this to cook for 3 to 4 minutes. You'll see that during this cooking process, all the water is going to start evaporating out of the batter, leaving behind just the oil, which is then going to get into all of the nooks and crannies of the coral to help it crisp up. Then once the coral is a lovely golden brown, we're going to gently slide it out of the pan using a butter knife or an offset spatula and onto some paper towel to remove any excess oil. Repeat this process as many times as you need, and now you've got yourself a very beautiful and elegant looking garnish for your pancakes. Speaking of pancakes, we're going to start preparing them by separating the whites and the yolks of 3 large eggs. Do this by cracking an egg in half and then gently pass the yolk between the 2 halves of the shell while letting the whites fall into the bowl below. Once they've been separated, we're going to place the yolks into a separate bowl. Then once our 3 eggs are separated, we're going to place the yolks to one side while we focus on making our meringue. Using whatever method you want, we're going to whisk the eggs until they're foamy. Add in 1 teaspoon or 4 grams of cream of tartar and continue to whisk the egg whites. Then while we're whisking the egg whites, we're also going to add in 35 grams of white sugar in 3 separate additions. During this time, you can question some of your life decisions, including why you decided to whip up the egg whites by hand when you've got 2 stand mixers, a stick blender, and a hand mixer in the house. After you're done questioning your life decisions and also you've added in all of your sugar, you're going to continue to whisk the meringue until you reach stiff peaks. You know this has been achieved when you can confidently turn the bowl upside down for 3 seconds and the meringue just stays in place. Once that's been achieved, just set it off to one side. Going back to our egg yolks, we're going to add in 1 tablespoon or 15 ml of whole milk and 1 teaspoon or 5 ml of vanilla extract. Whisk these together until well combined and then sift in 45 grams of all-purpose flour and whisk that into the batter until no lumps remain. Lastly, we're adding an Erina secret ingredient, strained Greek yogurt. This is just plain Greek yogurt that I've placed into a sieve to strain for about 10 minutes, and you can see that the liquid has drained to the bottom and the yogurt has a texture that's now closer to cream cheese. Add in 30 grams of the strained yogurt and whisk that into the egg yolks until a nice, smooth and thick batter has been achieved. Next we can begin combining our 2 egg mixtures. Start by adding in 1/3 of the meringue into the egg yolks and whisk the 2 together. We're not too fussed about keeping the air in the first addition, this is mainly to loosen up the batter so we can easily fold in the remaining 2/3 of the meringue. Once the batter is loosened and well combined, we're going to add in another 1/3 of the meringue and gently fold it into the yolk mixture by scraping around and underneath the batter and folding it over the surface like so. Repeat this folding process until the meringue is fully incorporated and then repeat with the last 1/3 of the meringue. By the end, you should be left with a beautiful light golden pancake batter. This stuff needs to be cooked immediately after being folded, so let's head over to the stove. To cook our pancakes, we're placing a frying pan over a low heat and adding in 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil that we're then going to spread around into an even layer with some paper towel. Then to the pan we're also placing in 2 ring molds that have been well greased. Pour your pancake batter into each ring mold until it reaches about halfway up the mold, and then to help these guys steam and cook on the top, we're also going to add in a little bowl of hot water. If you don't have one of these, just sprinkle a little bit of water around the pan instead. Cover the pan with a lid and allow these guys to steam for 10 to 12 minutes. After about 10 minutes, remove the lid and see whether the tops of the pancake are set by lightly tapping it with your finger, and if it doesn't leave any residue, that's a good sign that they're ready to flip. So to flip these guys, we're going to use a pair of tongs to gently lift up the mold and then support the base of the pancake with a spatula. Then we're going to carefully turn and flip the mold, making sure that we don't drop it on its side. Come on, man. On another note, if you're going to make these, make sure that the pan is well oiled and preheated before you start cooking too, because otherwise you might find that one of your pancakes is sticking like this guy is, and it's just not a fun time. Either way, once you've got your pancakes flipped, we're going to cook these guys for another 4 to 5 minutes to give the other side of the pancake some colour and ensure that they're fully cooked through. With our one good pancake still intact, we're going to run a butter knife around the edges to release the pancake from the mold. Careful not to burn your fingers on this thing because it's probably still quite hot. And then hopefully when the mold is removed, you should be greeted with the jiggliest, wobbliest pancake ever. Now thankfully this guy ended up being pretty tall, so I'm just going to cut this one in half to make our pancake stack, but like I said before, make sure that you just preheat and oil the pan well and you should be able to cook a couple of pancakes at a time to make a proper stack. Anyway, now that this guy is cut, we can finally assemble the final dish. To plate this up, we're going to start with the uglier looking pancake, or in my case pancake half, as the base of the stack. We're going to top this with a heaped teaspoon of a muscovado red bean paste. This has just been loosened with a little bit of hot water to make it a bit more spreadable. We're going to spread the red bean paste over the pancake in an even layer before topping it with the best looking pancake that you have, and now we can start making this guy look pretty. To begin, I'm going to make a couple of slices into the top pancake so that we can slide in the edible coral later. Next, we're going to pipe on some little dollops of whipped cream. This is just unsweetened cream with a splash of vanilla that's been whipped to soft peaks. After that, we're bringing in the edible coral, which I'm going to try and nestle into those cuts that I made earlier because I didn't look at the anime photo properly, and the more obvious thing would be that the tuille is just sitting in the cream, but hey, I made it work, so it's cool. Next up, we're adding on a couple of fresh flowers onto the opposite side of the coral, and as a personal preference, I'm also adding a few fresh berries. Then we're adding on the tiniest slab of butter onto the top, and to finish things off, we're pouring some maple syrup over and around our pancake stack and dusting it with a light coating of icing sugar. And here you have the anime kitchen version of Nakiri Erina's Souffle Pancakes. I'm sure no one's going to have a problem with that pronunciation. Now, since we did sandwich some of that red bean paste between the 2 pancakes, it'd be a shame if we didn't get a cross section. So if you'll indulge me for just 1 second, hell yeah. Okay, now let's see how we did. This was a lot of work for a stack of pancakes, so I'm really keen to see how they turned out. But first, I'm going to take out these flowers because they're just from the garden and I honestly don't know whether they're actually edible or not. Starting with the pancake itself, it's very airy and fluffy as one would expect, but the sweetness is actually cut down a lot here thanks to the addition of the strained Greek yogurt, which gives the pancake a nice richness and also a tangy flavour. This makes for a great pairing with the muscovado red bean paste, which is very sweet, and using the muscovado instead of regular sugar has given the red bean paste a more robust and caramelly flavour which you wouldn't normally associate with red beans, but it's definitely a welcome addition. The edible coral provides a nice textural contrast to the dish, and along with the caramel-like flavours of the muscovado sugar, it also adds a bit of a toasted nuttiness from the black sesame seeds. Overall, I think this dish came out well despite one of the pancakes sticking to the pan, and if you're up for a challenge and want to make a beautiful dessert in your free time, I think this is a great recipe to try out. As always guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please let me know by dropping a like down below, and let me know in the comments what food from anime and other media you want to see me make in the future. Subscribe to the channel for a new episode every single week, and until then, pull up a chair, unfurl that napkin, and I'll see you in the anime kitchen. Cheers.